The transportation and logistics industry has its own set of challenges. In the hot seat, industry thought leaders take on M&A and what's driving the future of transportation and logistics. Are you ready for the hot seat?
Welcome to In the Hot Seat with the Tenney Group. I'm Spencer Tenney. It's good to be with you. My next guest recently stated the UP-NS merger is about more than consolidation. It's about the redesign of North American freight architecture. With me in the hot seat, Paul Tonsager. Welcome to the hot seat.
Hey, thank you, Spencer. Look forward to talking with you. It is definitely an interesting time.
That's an understatement. Well, before we heat things up, Paul, why don't you take 30 seconds, provide a little context about, maybe some of the companies you've worked for the last 30 years and what you're doing right now.
Yeah, so I am actually a third generation railroader. My grandfather was a trainman up in Elko, Minnesota. My dad also followed in that, and my daughter's actually a counselor. So she's kind of diverged from the family business a bit. But so I've been steeped in this my whole life. I mean, we'd always end up at some sort of tracks when we were lost. My dad just kind of instinctively went to places like that. So but from a career perspective, I started with Maersk in Miami, somewhat more on the international side. Then I went to work for Crowley Maritime in the Midwest. And then I was recruited by the Illinois Central Railroad to run their international intermodal group, which was one port, basically, New Orleans. But that really gave me entree into what today is called PSR. We didn't call it that back then. But, although I was young and I didn't get as much exposure as I would have loved to, I mean, certainly I was around Mr. Hunter Harrison, who is basically the Steve Jobs of the railroad business. There's been no greater change agent the last 50 years than Mr. Harrison. And so you kind of got a view of how he looked at the world and how he operated a railroad. The IC was small. I mean, today you'd say it was a short line. Mm-hmm. But of course, then we were acquired by the Canadian National Railroad. A lot of that had to do is they wanted him. It was the worst railroad. It had been owned by the Canadian government, 120,000 employees and all of that. So I continued on my path on the international side. I ran the ports, and then I had the opportunity in truck diversion, which is kind of the topic of the day, especially with the UPNS. And then I had an opportunity to go open up China for CN Rail. So I spent 5 years in Shanghai, and we opened up multiple offices over there. I came back. I kind of took the jobs that nobody else wanted. I ran our barge warehouses and things like that. So it gave me a broader scope on logistics. I left, and then I became Chief Commercial Officer at Patriot Rail and Terminals, which is a short line operation. And did that. And then my last full-time job was Vice President of Procurement at Maersk for North America. And that incorporated certainly all the rail, trucking, and chassis spend, amongst other things. And now I'm doing quite a bit of consulting and kind of having some fun.
Well, I was joking with our producer, Galen, all of that, 20, 30 years of experience, all of these blue chip brands has kind of put you in a position. You're kind of like that NASCAR that everybody wants their logo on now. You've kind of taken a position in multiple different advisory boards. So tell us a little bit about that, some of the work that you're doing. Some of it's AI related, some of it's tech. How are you bringing value to these folks that are trying to bring in your really interesting experience to help guide their futures?
Yeah, in fact, funny enough, I just published a Substack article on that today. And the theme really is I turned 60 in April, and I'm like, okay, so I knew I didn't want to go back to the corporate world. I mean, it just doesn't suit me. You want to move faster, and that's not kind of the place you want to be. It is what it is. I mean, these are phenomenal companies that I've worked for, but I'm kind of like not really knowing about startups and pre-seed and all of these things that I got attached to a venture capital group where I'm a very small LP, but that gave me entree into being more of an advisor to some of the companies that we've invested in. And again, it was not really AI back then. I mean, that was 2 years ago, but AI has just exploded. So now most of these companies that we've invested in have, they're doing AI, because unless you have that attached to your name somewhere, investors aren't going to really look at you. And so, but that's expanded my portfolio a bit to, people that are outside of the venture capital group that I'm with. In fact, at Manifest, Spencer, where you and I had a good conversation. I met a couple of folks that we're starting their business. The interesting thing about it is I'd say 90% of them are Stanford grads. It's a very small alumni. They're all in Silicon Valley for the most part. I do work with people from Berkeley and MIT and Wharton. And of course, I went to the University of Chicago, and I'm like, where are the UC folks? But it was like, they're at the Fed or on Wall Street. They're not really in the Valley. So, but that gave me the opportunity to start really small. And, it's all about curiosity. You got to ask. You can't be afraid to, I don't know anything about this. I didn't know anything about this. And so you just need to probe and ask questions. But I think a lot of the value that I've been able to bring, or I hope I've been able to bring, is like the pitch, right? So, I start out saying, I hope you're okay with honesty. And most will say yes until I start. And then they're kind of like, well, I don't know if I want that much honesty. But the reality is, when you're making a pitch, you're not making a pitch to a VC. You're not making a pitch to a Silicon Valley person. You're making a pitch to a potential procurement officer that needs to look at, how they're billing and who their suppliers are. And it's in the past, you'd get SAP or some of these big platforms, and it was such a big deal. I mean, the boss would come in and say, we're going to bring in SAP or Salesforce. And everybody in the room is like, oh, crap. Really? Because everybody knows the pain of that. What I have found, my experience is, you don't have to have that pain.
Yeah.
So it's kind of fun. You can actually solve problems, which is unique. So it's been like I said, a very interesting journey for me.
Well,
and by the way, they're all about 30 years younger than me too. So
well, that must be fun too.
It's fantastic, right? Fantastic.
Well. Speaking, you mentioned being honest and and solving some problems. So, and IT's the merger. So let me jump right in here. I'm going to read you something. This is from Trains Pro industry publication, article from Bill Stevens, who I'm sure you one of your peers. But here's a comment. It says, this is from CPKC CEO Keith Creel. He says, we believe that a transcontinental merger would trigger permanent restructuring of the industry and result in a disproportionately large railway whose size and scope would require others to take action. It goes on to say, this will likely result in an unnecessary wave of railway mergers that today is not the best way to support American businesses nor the public interest, and has the potential to create more issues than it solves. What say you, Paul?
I say that I know Mr. Creel. We all work together at the CN, and he is the best operator out there. I mean, there's no doubt that he was kind of the right-hand man of Mr. Harrison, and he learned all the good things, because there's always good and bad. But Keith is an incredibly good operator, and they're lucky to have them. But my issue is, I would go to I'd go to anybody and say, how do you feel the railroads are doing today? And I would be very suspect that people would say, oh, they're great. I'm getting everything I want out of this. So if the premises were okay today, I don't know if I agree with that. The other thing is, we've all been around long enough to know that, when I first started, you had the Wisconsin Central, the CN, the CSX, the IC, all trying to coordinate exactly what they're trying to do today. Now, of course, CN bought the WC and all of that, but the reality was it wasn't very successful. And part of it has to do with your operating philosophy. Who owns the customer? how do you manage the assets? Where's the technology to bridge some of these things? If you're going to do, there's certainly things that I saw what the BN and CSX are doing, and I hope it works, because that's what the industry needs, especially from a truck diversion perspective.
Right.
After working for Maersk, who's a very serious player in all of that, they deal with Home Depot and Amazon and these big customers that you have to be pretty serious and long-term about what your offering is. Although, today price plays into it and things like that. But I would challenge the fact that the railroad industry is where it could be. And again, you go to customers, there's not one customer. I'll go 95% of customers that are rail served that go, man, they're fantastic.
Yeah. No, I think that's a really important take. And obviously, when there's a projected $2.5 billion in potential synergies on the other side of this integration, if it actually happens, that's material in terms of improving the health of the operations. And so, but again, projected and execution are two totally different things. And so, but let me do this. I want to get your take on kind of where we're at, but I want to provide context for that, because you did write a really interesting paper here that kind of went back and shared where some of your just the way that you think had a lot to do with some of the time that you spent setting up offices and operations in Asia and in Shanghai 20 years ago. So you addressed some of this in your paper, but I would love for our audience to understand. Tell us what was happening at that time, and what is the application now?
So, I actually I took Chinese in college, and I was there in 1986. Was in Taiwan and Hong Kong because my teacher didn't want to go to mainland China, but I did go up there. So, I went back first time again in 2004. So I go from 86 to 2004, which an incredible difference. But I go from 2004 to 2025, and there's an incredible difference. So I feel really fortunate when I was there, because it was the golden time. It was deals to be cut. People didn't know what to do, but stumbled through and found success and all of those things. But, and this has to do a little bit of what we talked about with the merger. Everybody thinks about intermodal because that's the volume. And I think that's what most people that I'm around are in with trucking and things like that. But, the real moneymaker is manifest or carload business, which I think that will get the most, or anti-merger will be that group of people. And so, in 2004, you go to the Huangpu River in Shanghai, and that's when the port had not located out to Yanshan or any of that. And there's all these piles of lumber wrapped up, and there was numbers across it. And that was the cell phone number of the owner. So that's how you had to buy that product. There was not a lot of containerization and things back then. So I was really, really fortunate to have a couple of folks that pushed this, and Jim Foote, who unfortunately has passed away, and Mr. Harrison. But my boss at the time was J.J. Roulé, who ended up being CEO of CN. And he was an incredible, I would say, the best chief marketing officer of the last 20 years. Jim was also incredibly good. But the vision, again, was not, because Mr. Harrison was not an intermodal guy. So you didn't want to push the opening of the office on, we're going to get a lot of containers, because he said, I don't know if I want all those containers. But a lot of it had to do with, certainly Canada is a commodity-driven country, as we know. And so are the exports out of the U.S. And so how are the Chinese buying these products? Well, back then, a lot of it was bulk shipping. Mm-hmm. Chemicals, bulk shipping. There was some import of containers, but a lot of it was traditional shipping. And so how do you set up your infrastructure in Canada and the U.S. to meet that demand, but then also look forward to know that containerization will happen? And how do you set up transloads and all of that, DDGs and chemical and pulp and lumber, that you're ahead of the game a bit and you've got a product that you can present to customers that, oh, okay, this is good because this is about really what I'm about to do. And so I think there was a lot of wisdom in that. And frankly, it really wasn't my wisdom because I was an intermodal guy. But I went and had an incredible 5 years with my wife and daughter. But we did end up building out transload facilities, and we did end up, I would say that CN and the Canadian ports really shot over their weight class. I mean, there's no reason why Vancouver and Rupert should be competing with Seattle and LA if you're up and up, right? But they did, and they had incredible product, and I think they still do have an incredible product, but it was not going in saying what you thought needed to be done. It was going in thinking, okay, what do we think our customers are going to need? And that there's a big difference.
Yeah. So let's just kind of pivot to today. This has the potential for a lot of winners and losers around this proposed merger. And you had a comment. Let's see if I can find it here. It says, winners will be those who position transloading infrastructure for economic optimization, not just interchange workarounds. Can you unpack that for us a little bit? Because I think that's pretty interesting there.
Because, I think, again, we are in a world that we're split up by a river. We'll just look at the U.S. I'm not going to talk about Canada, but again, we're split up by a boundary why? A lot of it had to do, there were 27 railroads headquartered in Chicago at one time. Now there's none really, but, so as we all know, the history of it was a mishmash of a lot of stuff. I mean, you watch the Gilded Age and now that actually they mentioned the Illinois Central Railroad, which I was kind of like, wow, that's kind of cool. But the reality is you need to look at these as networks. So I'll use, for example, from a port perspective, I look at assets, and that's what you get ingrained at when you're there's nobody better at managing assets than the railroads. I mean, nobody. Part of that is because they can, but they do a good job at that. So you look at LA, and you look at a steamship line, and the problems that LA has with regard to assets. Although I heard Gene Soroka just taught I think they've gotten better. I haven't been around it enough, but the reality is, if you're a railroad, that's not a place you want to put your equipment. It's not LA. You're doing it because you're forced to, because that's where your customers are going today. And the infrastructure, transloading infrastructure, it's all there in LA. I mean, I always thought that after the pandemic that LA wouldn't be what it is again today, that other ports would kind of pick up the mantle, but they've been very successful at kind of getting that business back. Mm-hmm. But so why wouldn't UP go to Maersk, which is not their customer? So I'll say Evergreen, and say, you know what? Why don't we look at Philadelphia or Norfolk to Kansas City instead of LA to Kansas City? There's a lot of flow in Norfolk. I'll incent you a little bit on price, so you'll go through that because I'll save money on assets. And I don't know if Evergreen or Maersk would buy into that, but for them, it's all price. So, if you're saving money on assets, so I think that's one thing you start looking at from a network perspective. And then, certainly from a transloading perspective, that allows you to not have to have the OD carrier set up. I mean, you can go anywhere as long as there's a truck, and you can do certain things even for commodities. So I think the map needs to be looked at more as a network, an overall network, a holistic network, not just for railroads.
Yeah, I think you had a line here in this article where you said that control points over track miles. And I think that's a good point that you just kind of made, that just realize the holistically looking at the map and just saying where are the control points for us where we can actually create leverage. And well, let's talk about the potential responses here, because I think that I think there's two different things. Berkshire Hathaway said they want no part in some type of merger market or participating in that, at least not now. what do you see as some of the potential outcomes or responses from competition if this merger goes through?
Well, I mean, I think, at the end of the day, your customers want to be served, but they want to be served at a price. And so, you've got, I look at CSX, they've got industries that are closed to them, and they're always going to have that business. But I think it's sharpening up what you do. I mean, the carload business is the carload business. You're going to get few remanufacturing. And I know I saw BN just opened up, they've got a new facility open. But if you look at it over a broad spectrum, how many facilities are you going to have? And again, it gets back to, will this make you more as a commodity or as a customer of BCO? Will this merger make you more competitive in your markets? And will this merger, because, the reality is I've been through it. A lot of people have been through it where you've got to get letters of support. You want 1,000 letters. I mean, I remember it was a numbers game. You just wanted, how many letters of support did I get? Well, some of those letters of support are going to come with the goodies. And I think that's what people are most afraid of is, will UP give away too much than this is worth? I don't think Jim Venn is going to give away too much. But I tell people now from a consulting perspective, you better have your list of goodies prepared. Make them realistic. Yeah. If you say, I want all this, you're never going to leverage the railroad. It's just not going to happen. So I think the folks that are going to be the most against it, of course, are going to be the associations, the people who've already come out.
Right.
I think most people are sitting waiting to see what happens before they make a prediction because, say it goes through, they're going to be like, did you support us? You didn't support us, did you? I'll leave it at that. But I do think that the BN, that doesn't surprise me at all. I mean, why do they need CSX? They've got an incredible network. They can partner with CSX. I think when Ancora came on, and again, I told you I'm a fairly opinionated. When Ancora came on and certainly attacked like Mike Corey and stuff, who's an awesome operator. But they opened up the door, now you're the beggar. Why do you want to be the beggar? So none of this surprises me. And I think it'll be, 5 years from now, we're still going to be digesting this. This is not a snapshot in time. This is a long process.
What could be some unintended consequences from, the two parties in the actual merger? I mean, what are some things that maybe they're not seeing, but maybe you see it for that could create some damage?
I think the biggest, the biggest one is, we all know, we did it at Merck. When you're buying companies that you integrate, your management team always wants to run to the silver thing on the ornament on the tree, which is the new company. And so it gives you a new sandbox to play in. And so I guess the challenge will be, and I don't know if it's true or not that this will happen, but my concern would be that is the management team fully engaged with their current franchise? Are they able to be? You've only got so much brain power, right? And I think that part, from an operating perspective, I'm not worried about that. These are pros. They say they're pros. But from a marketing and opportunity perspective, will you be, oh man, I get a new port. Oh, okay, let's go figure that out. That becomes the challenge, I think. And the other thing you've got to remember is that railroads really aren't marketing companies. They're operating companies.
Right.
Steamship lines are totally opposite. They are marketing companies. They are not operating companies. And so that's why you see this friction, like why I don't have cars and all of those things, because their drivers are a little bit different. Certainly the competitive landscape is a lot different between the two. So, I mean, to me, that would be the biggest concern. And I think if you're a short line or you're somebody that wants something from a railroad for 2 years while you're going through integration, you better have something really darn good for them that's going to move the needle, or it's going to be really hard to rise above the noise. And I think that's just normal. I don't think that any different poor management or not. I just think that's the way it is.
Now, let me pivot a little bit to kind of the stuff that you're working on right now, heavy on the AI side, heavy on the tech. And we talked about part of your background, decades of procuring certain types of technology, and you have labeled yourself as a skeptic, which is now actually, being very complimentary to what some of the developments that are happening within these teams. And so, I'm curious, what are the misconceptions about this rapid development, evolution of AI right now that a lot of folks get wrong?
Well, my wife thinks it's going to come and take our brains and do all these things, which I don't think, at least in my lifetime, that's going to happen. But I think, again, we've got this mindset of these big platforms as these huge platforms that everybody spends $500 million on, and integration. It takes everybody. This is not that. I mean, I was with one of the folks that I work with who does speech to text for maintenance. They walk down the track and they're talking into, the AI, and the AI prompts them and talks to them. And then it's in a system because everything's written by paper. So is that transformative? Yes, it is, but it's very specific and it's very actionable, and you can put KPIs around it. I mean, if it's not working, quickly.
Yeah.
And I think the biggest challenge is that, enterprise accounts, I don't want to say hopeless, but they're going to do their hits. They're going to focus. But, smaller companies that are low margin, like trucking. I mean, I look at anything that's under 10%. That coming from a railroad, that's not a great margin. Mm-hmm. Where you've got not a lot of pricing ability today. Where are you going to get it from? And I think you get it from how you improve your systems through paperwork and all of these things. It's not getting rid of people. It's freeing them up to be able to help you grow where it's needed, calling customers, finding, a better supply, however you want to define that. And I think that's and I also would say that if you're looking at AI, don't be afraid to say I'm dumb. I don't understand it. I think that was the big issue 10 years ago. CEOs didn't want to look stupid in front of their CIO, so didn't ever question it.
Right.
That's not the way it is today. It's very easy to learn it. And so I think the key is this clean data, which nobody has from the past. So you've got to start somewhere. And even if you're not going to go to AI, you need to figure out what clean data is in your organization, start doing it, because you will be using AI at some point. And there's very little historical information you can pick up now. It's kind of like, okay, we're starting and we're going, because nobody has any clean data or data that's relevant that's going to allow AI to come in and at least build a historic look at what your business has been. Or if you want to do that, it just takes so much more time to hire people to do that. And is it worth it? So I also think don't go to somebody that's going to say, I'm going to do everything for you.
Right.
Go find excellent AI companies that will do specific things for you. There are a lot of them out there. And frankly, there are a lot that are trying to do pilots right now because they've got to get these bots to learn. And so you might not even have to pay a ton. But friends of mine say, well, I'll get to it in a year. And I say that it's gone in a year. If you don't start at least building a plan for the next 6 months, it's moving so fast.
I think that's what's intimidating to a lot of folks, is just the recognition of how fast folks are going to need to evolve. But what I hope to hear from you, Paul, is that, and you made a point of this offline, like there's a lot of folks 55, 60 plus years of age that, unlike, previous technological evolutions, like this is one of the most easy ones to kind of apply and learn in real time. I mean, it's moving very fast, but the learning curve is not near what some of these other technologies have required. And so I hope they hear that encouragement, because I think there's a lot of folks that are, with all the other things that are making this industry challenging, which there's a, litany of things that we could talk about. I hope that they see AI, some of the folks that you work with, as a, this is an asset, as a way to quickly accelerate the way that you can solve problems. And I really liked what you said about, where do you start? Like what area of our business is creating the most friction, the most drag? Let's just isolate the most specific issue and go find who's the best at doing that one thing. Let's start our education there. And to me,
I mean, the starting point is easy because everybody's got problems. I mean, and most of it has to do with paperwork or manual or whatever. But one of the interesting things is, just because I'm pretty passionate about this, 55 and older, because I am, but I think that there is so much opportunity because, we're not like our dads. I know your dad was in the military, so he might be a little bit different, but I plan to work till I'm 75 doing something. Right. And this really gives you the ability to do it, to stay engaged. Everybody I work with is 25 to 30 years younger than me. So you get that invigoration talking to these people because they're high energy. And so I think my recommendation especially is take a class. I mean, I took a 10-hour IBM class. A lot of it is repetitive. And then I took something called RAG, which is a box that they put, a secure box that they put more information in. And it got to the coding and I said, I give up. And the reason why is because I don't need it. And so you get the basics so you can have the understanding. And I'm working on a project right now to match, what I call them old people, but the people I'm working with say legacy people with founders. And very specific, like if you're a chemical guy and you're doing something with how do you do that? And then how do you go to a company and say, I have this experience with credibility. I've got this AI. We're coming in to help. And it's a project I'm working on right now and I hope it's successful, but these are things that need to be done.
Yeah. Well, to that point, what is, and, we'll wrap things up here in a minute, but I'm curious, out of all, I mean, you kind of have an interesting seat, Paul, where you kind of have your eyes on a lot of different emerging technologies. I mean, what do you think is the most disruptive, exciting, but technology that will be available, that is on the cusp of the next couple of years?
I think, the reality is it's exciting, but a lot of it's boring. They're trying to solve boring problems. This is not shooting a rocket to the moon. This is going into an AR department and saying, what have you got manual? Let me send my bots in. So the technology itself is exciting, but what it does is pretty dull. Right. Which is okay. And I think the other piece of this is this concept I'm working on, we're calling it grip now, which is not a good thing because we don't want to call it handshake, but the reality is I was talking to Peter Chen, who runs a company called Ventus AI, and I was telling him about it, and he said, do you need an app for that? And I said, probably somewhere along the way. I said, wait a second. He got a thing called Lovable, and within 5 minutes, I had an app.
Wow.
It wasn't perfect, but it was a starting point. So think about that. I'd given him a concept, and he had put it into this Lovable, and it created an app within 5 minutes that you can use to work off of. I said that blew me away. Think about that. That's where we're going.
That's pretty amazing. Well, listen, I got one last question, a little bit of a wild card for you here, Paul. We covered a little, kind of a wide spectrum. Oh, we want to go Dolphins here. Let's see this. Who is the team on the schedule you're most excited about watching the Dolphins play this year?
I hate to say it, but the Bills. It's if you can beat them, it's kind of like a Cubs fan, right? It hurts. But if you can beat Josh Allen twice, you're probably in a really good spot. And it's always a fun game. But yeah, I mean, my daughter, she's the one too, and she's like, why?
Well, I got to tell you, I got lots of respect for you, Paul, but I'm not betting against Josh Allen. I don't think that's happening. And so, well, listen,
Special. He's special.
he's very special, but anything can happen here. Listen, this has been a fascinating conversation here. I really appreciate the time, the things that you share with our audience. That's going to do it for us here in the hot seat. We will see you next time.